Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the Who Stuff channel. Today we've got another episode of the podcast series where today we're going to be talking about underrated stories. Stories that we think are better than people say or not as bad as people say, or they're hidden gems or whatever. So we've each picked 3 stories that we think are underrated. I'm going to go first. Starting with one from the classic series, Frontios, which is not one that people really dislike per se, but not many people ever really talk about it. It never really gets mentioned, and it was one of those stories that before I got it, I always kind of forgot existed because it just never really gets talked about. But I love it. I think it's a standout story of the Peter Davison era. Very interesting story, very different. It just ticks all the boxes for me, and it's one of my favourite Peter Davison stories, and probably one of my favourites ever, so I think that's a great one. Then, moving on to the new series, we've got Love and Monsters. This is kind of the cliche one to say because it used to be really, really hated, and it still is, but a lot of people say it's underrated. But I just couldn't not mention it because it just gets better and better for me every time I watch it. I started off just not liking it, pretty much just because everyone else hated it. But over the years I've started to really like it, and I rewatched it recently and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I think it's just the way Russell T Davies incorporates the message of sort of toxicity in a fandom is really good, and it's sort of even a lot more relevant now watching it. Sure, the monster looks pretty silly, but I mean it was designed by a kid, so you can't really, it's not a big deal for me. Peter Kay, I just think's hilarious in it, and it's just a lot of fun. It's an interesting story with the Doctor not really being in it much either, but no, I think it's great. It's really, really good. Finally, we've got The Wedding of River Song, the Series 6 finale. I could probably just put all of Series 6 on this because I love Series 6, but especially this. A lot of people hate it. A lot of people think it's really convoluted and a bad end to the arc of the series. However, I just think it's amazing. I mean, I do probably need to rewatch it, but I've just always loved it. I just find it a great story, and I don't really get why people dislike it so much. So yeah, that's my 3.
My 3, well, it's hard to pick 3 because there's so many stories that I feel are underappreciated, but I'd say one of them is probably The Leisure Hive, the opener of season 18. I don't love it as such. I think it's decent, but I feel like it kind of gets a little bit too much hate. Like, it's not that bad, but I can see where some issues with it are. But yeah, I just think it's a bit undeserving of all the hate it gets. Second, probably The Sontaran Experiment. I've seen a lot of hate for it, and I never understood why. I think it's a pretty solid episode. I feel part 1's a bit not great, but it's still okay. It's just solid. It's no Time Warrior, but it's okay. Then I'd say my 3rd is probably the Series 3 Dalek 2-parter. I could have just picked loads of episodes out of Series 3 that are underrated. It's a great concept. I think most of the hate's because of the pig slaves, but because some of you may know I'm a massive fan of Space Pig, I don't really care about that. But yeah, I think it's a pretty solid 2-parter.
My first story is one I watched probably about last week, and it's the rescue in the William Hartnell one. Now, normally for 2-parters, I find them to be a bit more filler stories than anything. But this one, I really, really enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to, because I thought the the like monster of the story, Coquillion, I thought he looked really cool, and that the twist at the end, I wasn't really expecting it to happen, and it was quite cool. The interactions between the Doctor and Vicky was something I really liked in the story, and it's just one of the better William Hartnells that I've seen. So, my next story is one that I had a bit of debating whether to do this story or Destiny of the Daleks, but I decided to go Planet of the Daleks because it's one you don't really see people talk about that often. But normally for six-parters, again, I find six-parters a bit boring most of the time. But this one really, it hooked me in really quick, and the continuation from Frontier in Space was really good. The Dalek design for this is great, especially the Supreme Council Dalek. Obviously, John and Katie are sublime in this story, really good. The side characters, again, they're really good in this story. It's just one I really enjoy watching, and if I've got some time to kill, I'll put it on. And my last story is New Who from season 3. It's Gridlock, which is one, again, people don't talk about as much as they should, because it's probably my favourite.
Agreed.
I was going to say it's my favourite of season 3, but it's definitely not. But it's really close to being at the top. The concept is really good. The Face of Bo coming back again is good because it's the the end of the New Earth trilogy. It's such a fun story with the 10th Doctor going through everyone's cars. You get Brannigan, which is he's there. And it's just it's one of the better ones of Series 3. Series 3 is probably the most underrated series of New Who.
Yay, Max finally said a good amount in our stuff video.
So, I had a really hard time picking 3 because I have seen pretty much every story apart from obviously the missing ones, and there are so many that I could have chosen. But I think I've whittled it down to 3. Well, you'll see what I mean. Anyway, the first one is from season 17, and it's Nightmare of Eden. So, this is one that probably to a general fan, when they're collecting the classics, they probably look at it on the HMV shelf and they think, nah, not going to buy that for a while. But when I bought it, about when it first came out, I'd say, I watched it and I really enjoyed it. It has a really bad budget, yes, but it has the most intriguing concept I've probably ever seen in a story. The Mandrills as villains are so interesting, but yes, they look quite bad, but that actually their story is quite interesting, and I think Big Finish should definitely take that up a little bit. Tom and Lala are great with what they're given, and it's just an all-rounder a fun romp to cheer you up, so I really enjoy that story. So that's Nightmare of Eden. So if you haven't got that story, I'd really recommend it. The second one is from New Who, and it's from series 2, and it's a 2-parter, and it's The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. So I don't know if this one's underrated, but it's certainly one that I don't hear many people talking about as much as I feel like they should. It's probably one of my favourite 10th Doctor stories, if not my favourite. The side cast are actually really good in this one, unlike some other stories, which, you can just really not care for them, but in this one I do. This is the first appearance of the Ood, which I think is they're really creepy and generally quite scary in this one. Tennant is amazing in this, and the situation that the team are put in is quite, it's really dark stuff, and it's a proper base under siege episode. So if you love them, then that's one I'd definitely recommend. Now we're skipping back to Classic Who. Now I have kind of cheated with this one, so I do apologise, but you'll see what I mean. So it's the entire Key to Time. So as a season 16 is just so underrated. I won't go into every story, of course, because I feel like they're all about 6 over 10 or above that. But it's just so cool. Mary Tam as Romana 1, she's probably my favourite Romana. I just think she's so noble and wise and clever and cool. Tom Baker's actually good in this season, unlike some of his work in season 15, Underworld especially. So he's on good form, and just some of the episodes are, again, really intriguing ideas, and just I can't wait to see it on Blu-ray, because that'll be awesome, and hopefully it will get the love it deserves on Blu-ray. But just quickly, I'd probably say that my favourite story from the season is The Androids of Tara. So there you go, that's my 3-ish stories.
Okay, well, the joys of going last, because 2 of my stories have already been mentioned, so I'll get them out of the way first. My first story, it's another one from the Key Time, the Ribos Operation first story. This one is one that I found really boring on the first watch, but as I've rewatched it and rewatched the Key Time season with it, I've always found it's by no means the most action-packed story, or it's by no means, got the best plot or anything, but it's written by Robert Holmes, so you're automatically guaranteed some very witty dialogue and a fantastic script. So it's one you can put on in the background, it'll entertain you, and if a Doctor Who story does entertain you, then it can't be doing that much wrong. So yeah, the Ribos Operation is one I really like. And then my next story, again, it's been mentioned, apologies, but I completely agree with Ollie here, the Leisure Hive. It had its faults, but you can't really blame it. It's season 18. A lot of season 18 has its faults, controversial. Yeah, it's not the best. I mean, Tom Mullally just spends half the episode walking up and down the corridor, which looks like it's made out of garage doors for some reason, and the Pharmacy looked terrible. And what's the name? The opening shot is a bit it's just a shot of Brighton Beach for 2 minutes, but it's not too bad. And again, if a Doctor Who story entertains you, then it can't really be doing that much wrong. But then my last story hasn't been mentioned so far, and it's from my favourite series of New Who, and it's Into the Daleks. So this one's got a little bit of this nostalgia attached for me, because it was the second story I ever saw. But it's one that I really, really enjoy, and it's not your usual Daleks. It's this concept that's been used countless times before, a crew or whatever being, shrunken down into some sort of alien being or whatever. But it works fantastic with a Dalek, and it's nice that you just get one Dalek to focus on, a bit like Dalek in Series 1. You get the other Daleks just make a brief appearance, but it's solely Rusty, and yeah, he didn't need to come back, but as a one-off wonder in this story, I think he works very well. And it's also one of my favourite episodes for the 12th Doctor. He has some of the funniest dialogue in this story, and it's honestly one of the reasons why I keep coming back to it. There's the line about, don't really lasagna, and she cares so I don't have to. So that automatically adds a couple of bonus points onto this story for me. So yeah, there's my lot. Apologies, some of them had already been mentioned.
So that's it for this podcast video. I really hope you have enjoyed it. If you have, then leave a like and subscribe and turn on post notifications if you're new to the channel. Let us know if you enjoyed it. We might do an overrated stories version at some point, so tell us if you'd like to see that. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.